So what are these bugs?
Those are cochineal. They were imported from Peru, and they make the red color. Coveted red.
And the sponge is...
The sponge,
for
dual purposes. Cleaning, of course, but then also these tools on the wall that you see. Each one has a different design. And you can see how it's impressed into there. So what I do is I heat the tool, which it becomes scorching hot, and then I cool it on a sponge, and then I roll the design into the leather.
So you just kind of...
Yeah, you just press it in, and you also wet the book first.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, it burns through sometimes. You can't help that, but that gives it character, or what we call it gives it mistakes, and we call it character. Yes.
So what do you do on this station over here?
Oh, so that's at my sewing frame. That's where the magic happens. I'm actually sewing each section of pages that you see over there, attaching them to the cords. And the cords will be eventually what holds the boards onto a book, and then it will be covered in some kind of covering to protect it.
So these are this.
These are those. Yeah.
So it makes these what do you call that? What do you call this part here? The bump?
Spine.
The
Spine
bump?
of the book. And then the cords make the little bumps like this. The cord bumps.
The cord bumps.
The official name. Yes.
So these are the cord bumps. So now everybody knows why there's ridges on the spine of a book. The spine is the outside too, right?
Yeah, the spine is the outside.
All of them have that. So.
Yeah. And and to be a bound book, you had to have leather on it. So even if you just had leather protecting the cords like this, it's going to bring the price down and make it more accessible for most people to buy.
You have to have leather on the edges and the corners.
Yeah. But if it's just like that blue covered book, that's not really even considered a book at all. It's a stitched book or a pamphlet and boards. Yeah, book and boards. But a bound book is a leather covered book. Mm-hmm. Now, someone had mentioned to me, and I don't know if this is correct, that when you bought a book, you could buy just the printed pages. Yeah. And you could, you could go and have it bound yourself. Yeah, we do that as well. So that was, you could, like I have a catalog's right over here. You could buy any of those bound and sent in, or you could bring them in bulk, or you could just bring in one if you wanted one done. And you wanted to specify how you wanted it to look, you could have it bound too.
Would that make it more affordable?
It's actually, for us to bind it, it's more expensive because we're importing all of this stuff in to make a book, whereas the bound book from England, it's coming from these bigger factory type places really, and being funneled through a bookseller. Bookbinders they weren't paid very well. They were paid horrible. Everyone else, the printers, the publishers, the booksellers, and dealers, they all made a lot of money,
But not the
actual binder.
Really?
Yes. In England, the gold toolers and the leather workers made a lot of money, but the people who are doing the bulk of the work, just the sewing or that kind of thing, they're gonna make very little. So.
Isn't that always the case?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there's someone else coming in too. I wanted to, so they'll will be back at 10 or 10:30.
Hi.
Welcome back. Hi, welcome, and you're welcome to stay too.
I know. So I will come back at 10.
And then if he's not here till 10:30, can you wait with me?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
How are you?
I'm good.
Okay, we have the millinery. It's where they make clothes.
Linguistically, the terms are almost certainly all tied up together.
Okay.
But 18th century etymologists didn't really see fit to explain why that's the term they use to describe this particular trade. We do know that the
I was over at the Weavers and I saw him making a bolt of cloth. Does that go directly to you, or?
So it doesn't always come directly to us, but more often than not, it's going to be used internally here at the museum. As milliners and mantua makers within our space, we practice two of the sort of three main trades in the 18th century that would be working on the production of clothing. So we'll get some fabric from our weavers to make into clothing. Our tailors will get some fabric from our weavers to make into clothing. And then they'll also weave fabric that is going to be used within our like collections and sort of classic museum side of things, where if not a garment so much as like a piece of furniture needs to be reupholstered or needs to be patched or needs to be preserved. They won't do the wallpaper. Wallpaper doesn't tend to be woven, but they might do something for a piece of furniture that's been used either in our collection space or within some of our other like historic interiors. So for instance, our joiners or our cabinet makers might make a lounge or a chair as a piece of furniture, and then the weavers will weave the fabric that will then be used to upholster that piece of furniture. I do have fabric from our weavers. Actually, that whole second shelf up there is fabric from our weavers, and most of us within our space have at least one garment that has some fabric from our weavers in it. They can't make everything that we use though, because not only is some of the fabric that we use here in the museum today fabric that we can say for sure was being imported to Virginia in the 18th century, but we have no reference of it being made in Virginia in the 18th century. But also because some of it is just, we need so much of it, and our weavers can only produce so much. A really well-equipped weaver can weave about a yard of fabric an hour, but at minimum, that to make that yard of fabric an hour, you're looking at something like 20 to 26 hours processing that fabric to make into that 1 yard of material. For us, a plain gown is going to take a minimum 4 or 5 yards to produce. So you're looking very quickly at hundreds of hours of production time for the fabric for that one gown, which might only take 10 hours to make. So we end up buying quite a bit of fabric for use as well, though we try to make sure that it's as accurate as possible in terms of its fiber content, in terms of its weave structure, in terms of how it looks.
Is that like related to the thread count, or?
It can be related to the thread count. There's also some weave structures that just don't exist in the 18th century. Because the looms that they're being built on haven't been invented yet.
Like
so things like a punch
my
loom.
bamboo socks.
Well, that's the fiber. That's the fiber question. There is bamboo in the 18th century, but they're not really processing it into rayon or viscose.
Yeah, I saw the bamboo.
While rayon and viscose are cellulose fibers, they're going to act very similarly to linen.
Like linen, yeah.
We're not going to use any because it's not available in the 18th century. We're also not going to use anything that's, say, made on a knit weave. We're not going to use anything made on a jacquard loom because those really aren't available in the 18th century. This linen here for the shift was machine woven, but it was machine woven with a weave structure that exists in the 18th century and that can be replicated by hand. So sometimes that ends up being essentially our decision point. Is it plausible to make this fabric in an 18th century way, even if the fabric that we're using actually wasn't made in an 18th century way? Everything that we make in here, we're making entirely by hand, as the case would have been historically, and we are making it for use at the museum by ourselves and our colleagues. It's pretty rare that we should finish a garment that doesn't go on to be worn here by someone who works here. It's also really fun because we get our colleagues to help us make the tools that we're going to end up using. Sometimes things like, no worries, sometimes things like scissors, sometimes things like our pinking irons, our pressing irons, and so on.
Is that a pinking iron or a pressing iron? Or
pressing iron. The pinking iron is going to be used to cut that fun scalloped edge.
Is that heated when you do that, or is that?
It doesn't need to be because we're only using natural fibers in the 18th century. So heating it is not going to really do anything. A heated edge might be applied to fabric today if it's a polyester or an oil-based fabric because it melts the edge down. That doesn't happen here. If you light this on fire, if you heat it up too much, it starts to smoke and turn to ash. Our pressing irons, though, are going to be exposed to heat. The slug iron, the iron slug, is going to be what goes into the fire to be heated up. The back of the box iron will be opened, the slug will be inserted, and the back will be closed. That way you can iron without getting any of the schmutz, the ashes, the like that can be exposed to the iron slug. And you can also have multiple irons in the fire, if you know that idiomatic phrase. This is going to likely be the origin of it. A lot of idioms have to do with fabric at the end of the day. It's always fun to discover them.
I do DoorDash.
Oh, fun.
So I'm DoorDashing across America. So I'll do a dual app like Uber Eats.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 irons in the fire.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So I'll do some. They call it a dirty stack when you do 2 at the same time, which can get problematic if they go different directions. But if in the same route, you know.
I do wonder if like the fact that there is like Uber and Uber Eats and Lyft and DoorDash today are going to lead to some interesting idiomatic phrases of the future.
Yeah.
Because it's just becoming so ubiquitous. Like
We made up dirty stack because
Yeah.
it just means you're doing 2 different apps.
Yeah. Now I am both my roommate and I have like driven for like delivery for like Uber Eats and DoorDash before. Sometimes we'll ride along with the other and give each other a hand, which is fun.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I always find it very interesting when, you know, my day job, my full-time 40+ hours a week job is working in 18th century clothes, doing 18th century jobs, and then my second job is doing something so extremely modern.
Definitely modern. No,
I don't do it in the 18th century clothes.
Oh yeah.
Though I imagine that wouldn't be looked at too oddly here in Williamsburg.
Oh,
just
yeah.
being as everyone knows that the museum is here and gets pretty used to seeing people at the grocery store just coming from work.
So what's in the back?
So we have the back room set up as though it's the living space of the woman that we actually know owned and operated this space historically. So this is an original building, and a woman named Margaret Hunter is tied to this space as early as 1771, and we know she owns it at the time of her death in 1787. We don't have record of her owning any other property here in Williamsburg, any other property in terms of a place to live here in Williamsburg. Though admittedly, we only have about half of Williamsburg's tax records, so it's possible that she owns a building, say, on the other side of the street. But when she dies in 1787, this building is advertised as being appropriate for a living space or a working space. So our best guess is that she's working in the front half of the space, living in the back half of the space, and that the two-story 16-foot by 16-foot outbuilding was used as kitchen, quarter for the 6 people she enslaved, and then likely a laundry facility as well, because we think that's a skill, a trade being practiced out of the space.
Is there a second story here?
There is a half story above, which we think would have been storage space. We do actually have some insurance records for this building a little bit later on into the 1790s, at which point it had been inherited by Margaret Hunter's sister, Jane Hunter Charlton. So our best guess is that she and the people she enslaved are working in the front half of the shop, that Margaret is living in the back half of the shop, that the upper half story of the shop is being used for storage of any additional goods, and then the outbuilding is the kitchen, the porter, and the laundry. Today we have our break room hidden in the back half of the shop and in the upper story of the shop. But we try to make sure that everything that is visible within the space is as historically accurate as possible. So we have like a little tea table set up, some clothes thrown over the side of the chairs. But what you can't see is like our little IKEA bookcase that has some of the books we reference very frequently in my water bottle. And then upstairs we've got, you know, our computers and our little mini fridge and stuff. The microwave.
Oh, microwave. Oh.
Well, turns out we are 21st century people. We just do 18th century jobs. Here in our cabinet, we have another few pieces that were made by other trades here. Our buckles, for instance, have been made by our founders recently. The newest pairs that we have, the square and that like lovely little oval one there, I think were actually made based on buckle blanks that they archaeologically found on their site. So we know that buckles in that particular style were made in Williamsburg in the 18th century. And they're great for fastening shoes, great for fastening the bottom of one's breeches or one's neck stock.
Is this like a nightcap?
Very well could be. A lot of caps like that that survive are thought through provenance to have been wedding gifts to gentlemen at the occasion of their marriage. Sometimes they're called smoking caps. I've seen them called groom's caps in a couple of places. A lot of them survive clearly having not been worn to the point of being worn out, which makes us think that they were given as gifts in some way, so that someone had that sentimental value and didn't want to wear it to the point of being worn out.
Like the good china.
Quite possibly. There is in 18th century art certainly a tendency to see people wearing caps in the evening when they're, say, abed, but those tend to be very plain. In part because no one's seeing them. There's not much drive maybe then to have them be ornamented in some way or another. Probably objectively too, you don't want something that's too embroidered, too embellished on your body when you sleep, Goodness
Yeah.
knows, I think everyone has woken up with like weird creases on their body because the sheets gotten twisted around them. Imagine that embroidery sort of creased into one's head after sleeping with that all night. I can't imagine that would be terribly comfortable, especially because a fair amount of men in the 18th century who were wearing wigs on a day-to-day basis would shave their heads regularly. So that's certainly a lot of skin that can get those weird marks to it. All of the modern, and by modern I mean 19th century additions to leave sort of the 18th century building behind. I also really like this photo. When they excavated the sort of bottom of the building, they were able to find the original line of the subfloor, so they could raise it back to where it was.
Oh, it was lowered. Oh.
It was lowered, so when it was an auto garage, people could just drive right in.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
It was an
Kinnaman's
auto
Auto.
garage.
It's set up by at least 1926. I've found some advertisements in Old Virginia Gazettes about it. Then it's purchased by the museum in 1928. I think it's used as a sort of general store for a while. They use it as the sort of printer's office for a while, as the silversmiths for a little while. And then in the early 1950s, they work on restoring it to how it looks today, more or less. Albeit initially they had it painted green. They had a lot more hats, and they didn't actually have anyone doing the job of millinery, more so people just talking about what the job would have entailed historically. One of the things I find so fascinating about sort of the museum as a whole is just how much change there's been since it initially was founded, as more information has been found about the 18th century.
So would that be imported from like Belgium kind of thing, or made here, or
Which piece?
the blue?
Oh, the Delftware?
Yeah, Delft. Yeah.
So Delftware's in the Netherlands. today.
Netherlands, Holland, yeah.
Which is sort of in a weird political state in the 18th century. The Delftware itself would have been made in Delft. The contents, though, would have been Irish, an Irish manufacturer, Weston, having flavored tobacco, Scotch and Repay, to the flavor profiles you see advertised frequently. The tobacco is almost certainly a Virginia tobacco, or at least a mid-Atlantic tobacco. But as a colony of Great Britain, Virginia, Georgia, Maryland, the Carolinas aren't meant to do any of that processing themselves. That raw tobacco leaf is being packaged up in those hogsheads, shipped to Great Britain, sold to manufacturers who are drying it and powdering it and scenting it and flavoring it and packaging it and then selling it back to maybe those people who grew the tobacco in the first place, or at least the enslavers of the people who grew that tobacco in the first place. Margaret Hunter, the woman who owned this shop, we see record of importing and selling tobacco to customers. Snuff is a very fashionable pastime. The milliner's job is really to make and sell fashionable things, so snuff is something that makes a lot of sense to have in a space like this one. There's actually pamphlets that survive from the 18th century laying out the 16 or 17 steps to taking snuff in a fashionable way, which of course include...
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was looking at your thimble.
Yeah.
Was that made here?
I have had my thimbles repaired by our silversmiths next door.
So that's silver.
They're not actively making silver thimbles these days. Hi, welcome in. Thimbles in the 18th century, thimbles through antiquity, are made from a wide variety of materials. Personally, I really like silver thimbles because as a metal, it's soft enough that I can shape to my finger over time, and it's not going to leave the same sort of weird.
Residue.
Is not the right word.
The oxidation?
Yeah, it's not going to oxidize the same way that a brass or a copper one will, where it leaves that sort of film on one's hand that just doesn't come off.
Yeah.
And I don't like, say, ceramic thimbles very much because they don't shape to my hand.
They don't
at
give,
all.
yeah.
And leather thimbles I just wear out too quickly, so my preference are silver thimbles. There are still a few producers of silver thimbles today. I usually am able to convince my colleagues to repair mine. And then the engraving, my initials are engraved on my thimble, was engraved by our engravers down the way, because one of my colleagues and I do wear the same thimble size. Ooh. Now, admittedly, anytime we've mixed up our thimbles, we've been able to figure out who's pretty quickly, because our fingers are ever so slightly differently shaped, and you can see that my thimble is no longer perfectly circular. It's taken on that very specific elliptical shape of the middle finger of my dominant hand. But because we both wear a size 11, we have mixed them up from time to time. So eventually we just sort of decided we should get our initials engraved. That's something you see all the time on antique thimbles. Actually, this is only my second favorite
I love the
thimble.
stippling or whatever that.
That's going to help the needle point sort of catch on the not the needle point, the blunt end of the needle sort of catch on the thimble, so it doesn't go slipping and sliding, and you maintain your ability to hold it in place. You are actually trying to catch the blunt end of the needle with your thimble. You're catching the sharp end of the needle with your actual fingers, because that's giving you that spatial awareness, that tactile sensation that's going to allow you to sew without having to continuously turn your fabric over to see where your needle is going in and out. I definitely took a little bit of practice, because my assumption was always that a thimble ought to be used to protect the fingers from the sharp end rather than from the blunt end. So I have some pretty gnarly calluses, but honestly, that then illuminated for me why in a lot of 18th century, say, household management guides, it tells housekeepers to always look at the calluses of the people that they're hiring, so they could tell whether they were actually industrious workers or not. Because looking at the calluses that I've developed, you can totally tell, if you know what those calluses from 18th century jobs look like, what things I have the ability to do and what I'm doing regularly.
Makes perfect sense.
That's one of the fun things I think about our particular sort of experimental archaeological approach. We're getting a lot of knowledge by being able to be so hands-on with our source material and with being able to try to reproduce the skill sets of 18th century individuals. We end up getting a lot of insight into how things are made, how things are going to wear it, and what that means in the long term.
Now, may I ask, were you in the video that's at the art museum? I recognize
yes.
you came in. Yes.
Yes,
She's on the video now.
Oh, well, that I want to tell you, as a female, I loved that whole series of how everyone dressed, whether it was all the tying and you always see that, but even you did the soldiers all the way up. It was so interesting.
It was a really fun project. So the video in question, we have our new permanent textile gallery set up at the museum now, which we're all very excited about. And they have as an installation a video, I think the whole thing's like 20 minutes maybe, showing different clips of people from sort of all swaths of 18th century life getting attired. In that video, I was sort of informed that I was going to play the lady's maid to Lady Dunmore, so I got to wear clothes that I had made and put my colleague portraying Lady Dunmore in clothes that we had made. But there's also clips of like parents getting their children dressed, soldiers getting dressed, indigenous people getting dressed, working people getting dressed, and so on, just to show how many different ways there are to get dressed, and to show too that a lot of the dressing could be done by oneself.
Yes, like when she ties in the back, I thought, how's she going to do that? And the way she pulled it, as opposed to your role where you are assisting, you're doing all of that, and the Lady Dunmore is basically standing there, turning, whatever.
Certainly Lady Dunmore was in very formal clothes, which are one of the few kinds of clothing that adults are expecting to have help getting dressed in. That being said, the thing that Lady Dunmore was wearing and the thing that I was wearing were not fundamentally all that different. She had wider hoops on, she had a heavier fabric on, but they were both sack-back gowns with stomacher fronts, and I got myself entirely outfitted in my own outfit. They didn't end up actually filming that section, though they're planning to expand the video as time goes on. But one of the things that Megan, the woman who portrayed Lady Dunmore, and I found was that it was a bit of a hassle to get someone dressed in that style, because I had to continuously be asking, hey, is this tight enough? Is this sitting right? Whereas if you're doing that on your own body, you have the understanding of what it's supposed to feel like on. So I think that's one of the reasons why in the 18th century, the understanding is that you're only getting help to be outfitted in those most formal pieces. Everything else, it is honestly easier to do yourself.
Yeah, that was whoever came up with that. It was a beautiful project and so educational.
I will absolutely let our curator, whose baby that was, let him know that.
And there was a crowd. I want to tell you, even children were sitting there watching it. So if the young people or the little ones are interested, it was quite well done.
I will say my favorite part of that video is the one where the little girl is being dressed.
Yes, the 2-year-old. Was she about 2?
Yeah, she was about 2 at that point.
Yes.
So our colleague who portrays Martha Washington has 2 kids who are the perfect age to sometimes portrayed the Custis kids. So
Mm-hmm.
those kids were born essentially having jobs as they wanted.
So that was not her mother.
That was her real mom.
That was her real mom.
'cause,
Okay.
yeah, she was. You could see how
Because she
comfortable
would
the
go up and hug
child
her
was.
afterwards, and I said, that can't be
Yes.
another actor, at this
No,
point.
that's her real
That's her
daughter.
mom.
Perfect. That
We've
was
had
perfect.
the ability to outfit her multiple times for little films, which has been really fun.
Oh.
What I think is actually especially fun is when we've had the chance to outfit their whole family, because the lady here who portrays Martha Washington has an older son. Martha Washington had her living children, a son and a daughter, and the kids are the perfect age gap. But one of the last times we got to outfit her son for an occasion, he was really concerned about looking cool. Because he was 4 or 5, and at 4 or 5, it's not unusual to see little boys still in their child's frocks, still dressed in essentially the 18th century onesie, that sort of little almost dress-looking thing. So he was really concerned about looking cool, especially considering that his little sister was going to be wearing fundamentally the same thing.
Yes.
So both of these kids are around the same age, but one has been considered old enough to put on his breeches. One little boy is still in his frock here, and we know that it's a boy. There's sort of subtle indicators. He's got a cockade on his cap instead of a bow. He's sitting astride on his toy horse. His sash is so tied to the side. Those are all gendered markers of the 18th century.
Interesting. I knew the boys up to a certain point were wearing what the girls were wearing, but then there were those differences.
Very subtle. There's not much distinction in, say, the fabrics. There's not much distinction in the caps that are being worn, but there's all these little subtle things. One of the things I found so interesting is just how much sort of cultural literacy I've realized that I'm missing from my study of the 18th century, but how much I think I've been able to gain from working with 18th century as primary sources so much. So
Where
so
are the
his mom-
fabrics coming from?
England.
So all your cottons, all the way to your silks, etc.
They're all coming through England. They're not all being produced start to finish in England.
Not muslin, your common cloths that.
So
Any of
muslin
that?
in the 18th century does have a different definition than muslin today. Today, muslin we think of as a plain weave, undyed cotton fabric, oftentimes with some inclusions. Muslin in the 18th century is a high quality, lightweight cotton that's coming out of India. Calico, likewise, is a cotton that's coming out of Kolkata, out of Calcutta. A lot of fabric names that we still use today are coming out of 18th century locations from where those fabrics were being sourced. And just over the course of a few hundred years, those definitions shift. So a lot of wool and linen in the 18th century are coming out of England. England had really cornered the wool production market in Europe from about the 14th century onwards. A lot of linen is coming out of Ireland, as well as places like the Netherlands, like Belgium, really anywhere that has a long wet growing season, because linen comes from a flax plant, which is a very marshy plant, and you want that linen to be as strong.
Okay, we now have the jeweler, James Craig jeweler. Okay to film?
Morning.
Okay to film?
Yes, sir. Don't worry.
There to Midland. How you doing?
I'm making a bowl. I'm smoothing out the hammer marks made from hammering it into shape. Takes about 60 hours or so to make it from start to finish.
What's the material?
It's all silver, sterling silver. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask.
I'm just soaking it all in.
So again.
I'm just soaking it all in.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you from?
All over the place. Currently my car.
Oh, okay. All right.
So that's on one of these, what do you call those?
We're called
Yeah.
shaping stakes.
You have
They're
different
called.
ones and then
Yeah,
you just put them in
yeah,
the vise.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're made of polished steel. So it's harder than the surface of the silver. Everything was handmade in the 18th century. So the more the craftsmen could make things look like they weren't handmade, the more money they could get for it.
Now it's the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can you make weapons here too?
No. The sword is in here. I'm an ensign in the militia,
Oh,
so that's my ensign sword. A sword, yeah, swordsmith.
there's a swordsmith here?
Armorers, yeah, people who just make swords. Then they had armorers who made weapons. And it's blades of steel. And the hilts were usually glass or mostly glass.
Hello. It's okay to film?
Yes, most definitely.
This is the bakery. I think the bakery is back here. Yep. Valley Tavern Bake Shop. In the back of the tavern. Okay, now I'm walking in the bakery. Brick oven ginger cakes, which smell really good. These are air fresheners and cookies. Fresh out of the oven, like a couple minutes ago. Oh, no.
Oh,
Thanks.
so.
I just like the smell.
Really?
The book there is the recipe that they use.
That, yeah. Oh, they use at the, where did you say you get the dough?
The lodge,
The lodge? The Raleigh lodge? Or the,
the Williamsburg lodge.
oh, okay. Yeah, this is the front side of the tavern.
Your birdie here every 15 minutes. It's open if you have an admission ticket.
Okay.
But we also, in the backyard there, have the bakery if you want some snacks or something.
Okay.
They just finished some ginger cakes.
Oh.
It smells really good.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they bake the ginger cakes in the brick oven back there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So
but,
what-
but it's not a. You don't eat inside of this building.
No, we give tours through.
Got it.
Yeah.
When's the next tour?
The next one would be at 11:30. We're going every quarter hour today.
What time is it now?
Because of the time, like, to
It's
be
about
done
10 minutes from now.
like that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, those are good.
Oh yeah.
Well, they smell good. Okay, this is the apothecary / hospital. Guess that's why they painted it white. They have these storm, I guess, entrances for goods on a lot of the front of the buildings. But that's Shields Tavern. Special event closed for that one over there. I don't know what. That looks like maybe a tea house or something, but it doesn't have a flag out front. Not sure.
Welcome, welcome. Hi.
Do you have snuff boxes? I always wonder what those look like.
Sir.
Is it kind of like that, or small?
Well, you wouldn't.
I always hear the term.
No. So you know what snuff is,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
a tobacco. So you don't want a box that is lined with velvet for obvious reasons. I only have the velvet lined trinket boxes.
But would it be about this size here, kind of?
It could be any size,
Oh.
really, if you want it small enough to fit in your pocket.
Yeah.
But there were no set size or styles or designs.
I know nothing about tobacco because I've never smoked. So.
I am very allergic.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Yep. So no set rules.
All right. Thanks.
Absolutely.
And
It's an original building. There are 89 here. This is one of the 89. Built in 1739. George Washington was only 7. So take your time, look around. There are many, many handmade items. Now
so you say the original buildings are some of these buildings that you can't go in, are those owned by people?
All of them used to say private residence. There was a little.
Yeah.
That means that the people that work here can rent them.
Oh.
The foundation owns everything.
Okay.
So you can't buy one, you can rent one. And there are many people, I mean, you actually get on a list.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll call you because, you know, if you live right next door and work here.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That's pretty convenient.
Seems like an awesome place to work.
It's very nice. This is a special store. You will see things in here you don't see in the other stores.
Store here, printed store, 1739. We got people living here now before you get your house That there, that's the printed store. The printed store is like your colonial, like here. You get all these places like a pottery. It's called the printed.
Was unfortunately still enslaved, and so thus I petitioned on his behalf to the Virginia legislature that he be freed, and he would be freed, and he would adopt my name of James Lafayette, as opposed to James Armistead, who was gained his freedom in 1787. Correct, madam. Typically, slaves will adopt the name of the people who own them. So Armistead of New Kent County is a very popular family, or rather abundant family. It has many different members of the family to be found in Virginia. There is even an Armistead house at the end of the street here in Williamsburg. But typically that is the way it would work. They would be given a given name, James in that case, and then they would adopt the name of the family. So when he was given his freedom, he no longer wanted to have that enslaved name, so instead he simply adopted my name of Lafayette.
Making fabric here in the colonies are going to be enslaved individuals because there's no money in this. We always try to phrase it correctly. We always like to say no one ever chooses to make their own fabric. Without any money in it, it's just not an ideal thing to do. Back in England, where they've got more people, better infrastructure, better technology, and they're able to produce fabric faster, cheaper, and higher quality than I can, it's much more cost effective. It becomes a much better idea. But here in Virginia, tobacco is the only way. So you see very little competition. And that's why we know the names of the people who are having fabric made in the 18th century. Because if you wanted to make your own fabric, you only need a couple things. Number one is you need to be independently wealthy. So that's already eliminating about 99.9% of Virginians.
Right.
On top of that, I also need you to be staunchly patriotic. This is a high felony crime. I'll execute you if I catch you doing this in the 18th century. So not only do you need to be independently wealthy, you need to be a patriot, and only about a third of people are patriots in the 18th century. So I don't have a lot of people who make their own textiles. Just not worth it. Oh yeah, that idea that we're all patriots in the 18th century, we all love being Americans.
Not so true.
Even my founding fathers say that only about a third of people are in favor of independence, about a third of people are actively opposed to independence, and the last third don't care as long as their taxes don't go up. British taxes are much lower than American taxes.
Sounds like a familiar story.
I don't know. I thought are we really
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take a look around. Let me know if you got questions. What you got, Liz?
Nothing.
Nothing, just staring at yarn.
No, just one of these moments I'm gonna do some threading too, because I like fun as well.
Yeah. I definitely won't finish it. We got 5 hours of threading to do today.
Yeah.
That's one of the knots we tied. You don't want to mess with that because that's on a lower layer.
Yeah, I was wondering why that's popping through, because like I don't remember us having one this close to the end.
So yesterday you cut the bolt, and
Yep.
now today you're
Now
starting
we're winding
from
on the next
scratch.
yarns. So it's not a hard job, it just takes a long time.
How long does it take to set it up from?
About an hour per every 100 threads, so this one's only about 500, so it's only going to take us about 5 hours to program. It's very low for us. The loom we've got in the other room right now, that one's got 1,296 of them, so it's going to take significantly longer to program than this guy would. So you've got choices and you've got options when it comes to setting it up, but the simple answer is always going to be, this is the bottleneck in the process. So anything that speeds it up is going to be good for you.
You're a programmer right now.
That's exactly what it is. We are programmers. We're taking each yarn and programming when it's allowed to go up and when it's allowed to go down. I'm turning these yarns into ones and zeros. And so what I'm doing here in front of me, the order that these individual yarns get pulled through these harnesses is what's going to eventually determine what the textures I can achieve on the surface of my fabric are going to be. So what I've got right now is something called straight draw. My first yarn's on the first harness, second on the second, third on the third, fourth on the fourth. And I repeat 1, 2, 3, 4 about 500 times. And that means that when I press on these pedals by my feet, if I press on every odd harness, I can raise the odds up, lower the evens down, and that'll allow me to go over one yarn and under one yarn. But if I press on two that are right next to each other, that'll allow me to go over two and under two. And depending on the sequence that I go over two and under two, I can actually alter that, and I can start making blue jean material, a pattern we call twill in the 18th century, where you go over and under two yarns, offsetting by one every time, building up a texture on the surface of your pattern. I could build that exact texture up and at the top of the pattern decide I'm bored with it and go back down the other way instead of repeating, and that twill is going to build up in a diagonal line and then turn 90 degrees and go back the other way, and that's how I make chevrons on the surface of your fabric. And those are just if I'm altering the order that I press on the pedals. I can also change the order that my yarns are pulled through these harnesses here. Right now I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if instead I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, that would make chevrons in my fabric as well. And if I did chevrons with my feet and I did chevrons with my harnesses up here, they would meet on the surface of your fabric and it would actually make a diamond motif. And that diamond motif is what I've currently got on the loom in the other room right now. So you can expand and you can contract these very rudimentary patterns as big or as small as you want to build almost anything you want. On the rack behind me right there, I've got that red and white overshot design, which is a 256 step long threading sequence to get a 3.5-inch repeat of that pattern. So you've got lots of options available to you, which is why even though this isn't a particularly challenging job, it does require a significant amount of training. Skilled 18th century weavers are expected to spend a 7-year-long unpaid apprenticeship learning how to set up, program, and operate a loom. And then, now that you've learned how to set up and operate that loom, instead of being a generalist and learning how to do everything, I want you to specialize. You're gonna have one specific pattern that you will make for your entire career, getting really good at it so you can do it really fast. That way when I, as an end consumer, want fabric, all I gotta do is go to the store and buy a cheap, high quality finished fabric. Sounds an awful lot like the 21st century, doesn't it, everybody? Your system is not new. It's not even new in my time period. We've been doing it that way for thousands of years. Because that allows consumers to buy anything they want cheaper than they can make it themselves. That's exactly why we're sitting here weaving in the 18th century. The reason England can make fabric better, faster, and cheaper than I can is because they've got more people than I do, better infrastructure and technology than I do. And they also have cornered the market. They don't have anybody else competing against them because they've already outbid them many years ago. So if I start making fabric here in America, I will not make money off of it. I will be the first one to admit that if you want to make money, weaving is the wrong job in Virginia. But I will hurt the British bottom line by making enough fabric that England can't compete without somebody to question them anymore. So if you guys got money to burn, fabric becomes one of the best and most patriotic ways of showing off. We see people like Washington and Jefferson and Madison all have fabric made on their plantations as a way to show off their wealth and as a way to show off their patriotism. If you guys are skilled weavers in the 18th century working back in England, you could always come here to America where we will pay you top dollar to make what is essentially lower quality fabric and pay you for it. Because we just are hungry for American-made goods. So we start seeing our very own textile industry hop up here in America. We're not making a lot of fabric, not yet at least. By the end of the American Revolution, only about 10% of my fabric is made domestically. But this is so patriotic that the American textile industry won't be far behind.
What would it take to make a tartan?
Like the black, blue, and green one that I've got on the rack behind me there?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are easy. The setup can be a little bit difficult because I've got a somewhat small setup sequence and those are pretty wide patterns, but they are very plain, very boring fabrics that just happen to have a lot of fun colors thrown through them. So I would set up the work, what I've got in front of me here, with colors in it, and I'd throw the shuttle back and forth with colors in it as well. So it's going to be made the exact same way that brown and white checkerboard blanket on the bottom was made, or the blue and white checkerboard on the top left is made. They're just a checkerboard with no ground or no base to them. They're made up entirely of colors. They're pretty popular in the 18th century. Plaids are going to be seen all around the world. Cheap, high-quality imported plaids coming out of Great Britain are pretty common and pretty fashionable across the 18th century because they really like checks and plaids and stripes and prints. But it's just a matter of playing with colors. If I take that tartan fabric that I've got over there and I let it sit and bleach for the weekend, and I go ahead and remove all the colors from it, when I come back in on Monday morning, I will have a perfectly plain, boring piece of twill fabric. It'll look identical to if I left your blue jeans sitting in bleach for a weekend as well. It's made the exact same way. Not a difficult weave structure, not a difficult fabric to weave, you just play with colors. And you'll notice we call them plaids in the 18th century because tartans don't have any of those special meanings that you guys have for them in the 21st century. As a matter of fact, the first clan tartan won't be invented for another 60 years. So they're just plaid designs. They can be made anywhere. They have no special connotation, significant, or familial allegiances yet. We actually know the name of the guy who invented the clan tartan, and he didn't do it till the 1820s. So plaids, very popular, sell a lot of them here in the colonies. I'm never gonna bother making one of those, because like I said, if you're making fabric here in Virginia, our stuff's pretty low quality compared to what England makes. So I'm not gonna waste my time playing with a lot of those colors, building up a design, when I'm never gonna be able to recoup the losses of American-made textiles. So we don't bother with it. We buy British-made textiles. Isn't the king a lovely person, everybody? Smiling on us.
Yeah, that's
We gotta buy a lot of stuff from him. And we are going to do it the whole time the war's going on. My uniforms, my flags, my tents, my tarps, my blankets, my wagon covers are all made in Britain during the war. Because I don't have the people, infrastructure, or technology to do it here in the colonies.
What was the import cost?
Bargain basement, almost nothing. We buy everything from England with no exceptions to that rule at all whatsoever. And I'm going to take a little pause right here. I said everything and no exceptions. I didn't leave a lot of wiggle room there, did I? But right now, we're all thinking of all the exceptions, right? Little House of the Prairie, of course we all churn our own butter, of course we all build our own log cabins, of course we all sell our own clothing. How many butter churns have you guys seen in town today?
So far, none.
Yeah, you can look all day long if you want. Unless you go to the Cooper shop and look at the one he's actively building to send to another museum, you won't see any, because there's never been a butter churn in Williamsburg. If I'm churning butter, I'm not growing tobacco. Which one pays better?
Tobacco.
By a lot. I don't do anything except tobacco production, which means quite literally everything is imported. My butter is churned in Ireland, salted, preserved, and shipped 3,000 miles across the ocean in the 18th century, because that is cheaper than making it here in the colonies. So when we have to buy everything from England, shipping costs are very low. That idea that it's expensive to ship things across the ocean, that British taxes are very oppressive, is 100% American wartime propaganda. We all are mad at tea, right? Because the British tax tea, everybody. Y'all know what the British tax on tea was? It was 2 pennies per pound of tea. When I repealed that act and the Americans decided to start selling tea and put their own tax on tea, do you know what the American tax on tea was?
A lot more than that.
38%.
Wow.
Which is a lot more than 2 pennies per pound. So if you folks want to save money, you should buy British. Anyone who tries to make fabric.
So what are you doing here?
So the guys over here are doing a little bit of pit sawing. So what they're doing is they're got an 8-foot pit saw between them. Sawyer's pulling it up and the pitman's pulling it back down. So on average, you can cut about 1 foot to 2 feet a minute.
Nice job, Harold. You can knock that box off.
So, how many feet?
So you can only cut about 1 foot to 2 feet a minute.
1 foot,
Like
1 to
that,
2
yep.
feet a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
We can saw like
So-
that for quite a bit.
The bottom handle comes off, so you'll see that way you can take the saw in and out of the board as needed. And this helps us out because we have to do all of the cuts simultaneously. So, like on this board here, you see that we've got about 4 or 5 cuts going on. We need to be able to move that saw between the different cuts.
You go a foot and then you go a foot with the other.
Oh no,
cut.
we'll go as far as we possibly can on one,
Oh,
but then
okay.
we need to transfer it into the next one. Because the problem is you can't get around those safeties and those rollers. So how do
Yeah.
you get that saw out to start the next cut? You
Yeah.
can take the handle off the bottom. So the bottom handle is called a box. So,
Box.
Yep, and it's just a little wedged handle that you can put on and take off whenever you need to.
Smells like sawdust and smoke.
Yeah, we've been burning some of the waste from this big guy here. So we just finished up hewing this timber this morning.
What is
so
that, about a foot by foot?
It is a 12 by 12. So we just hewed this out of a tree. So in the yard, we've got a couple of logs from trees in the parking lot, and we're turning them into useful timbers. And
Waste not, want not.
Exactly. So this guy here, starting Sunday, we're going to be cutting into this one and turning it into 9 1 1/4 plank.
Check this out.
Oh, nice.
I'm cool.
Oh yeah.
Magnets.
But yeah, so this was fun. We
Looks like
finished it.
was that a grinding wheel over there for the tools?
So it is a grinding wheel. It is not for sharpening. It is for putting angles in.
Oh.
So one of the things that we have to do whenever we receive a new tool, like if the blacksmiths make us like an axe or a chisel, it usually comes very blunt. And the reason why is because they don't know what kind of angle or bevels do you want to put on it. So they give it to you kind of raw, and then it's up to the owner of that instrument to grind it into the grade that you want it to be, the angle that you want, how many angles do you want. Because each one of us carries a tool a different way, so whatever's more comfortable.
What's going on over there?
So that's the brick makers. So you're more than welcome to go back there and harass those guys.
Okay, I like harassing. So here.
Oh, please do. They need it.
Actually, I'm one of the carpenters, but I help our brickyard guys out.
So you're the best?
Oh yeah.
Of course.
They're going to be molding bricks here this coming week. Will be the first week of solid molding. And the clay that you see right back here, it's really boring color, right? It
beige?
Yeah, it doesn't have any red color to it at all. All the red color comes during the firing of the brick.
So that's bricks you make with that will be red when you're done?
Yep.
Oh.
So
I always figured the clay was red.
well, of course, some places that you go, you do see red clay, but our clay is always pretty similar to that.
Yeah.
And you can see the footprints in here.
Yeah.
People have been treading. They've been treading with their feet, and only 2 things that are mixed in there is just water and clay.
So it's like making wine.
Yeah.
Going in there and
you're churning that up so you can make a ball with it, and then you drop that ball of clay.
See if I can get
in this mold.
And then you have to put the water in there. Yeah.
So like right now, when you're treading this, if you try to form a ball with it, and say it runs through your fingers, then you got too much water. You need more clay. And if it's crumbly, then you need more water. Find the mold, right? So you get a little bit of sand in here.
So that's fine sand in there.
And you put a ball of clay, plop it in here, and then you take a stick and you just scrape off the extra. Okay, so you're gonna fill up one double mold, and then you take it and you plop them. You see the bricks back there?
Oh yeah, that's the drying area.
And the sun will dry them, and then after a while, this is what you have. You see, this is not a construction brick yet. This is just sun dried, right? So if this sits out in the rain right now,
It'll crumble.
it's not gonna be any good.
Yeah.
So once they've sat on that sand long enough, you take them and you put them in a building like that one back there. Okay, and that keeps the rain off.
Now it's no longer.
And you keep molding until you fill your building up. And then when you fill your building up, you take these, however many thousand of them you have, and you build a kiln. And that's what we have over here. And if you look, you can get a really good view of it right now. This thing was about 10 feet tall. And they've been taking it apart. So all of these bricks that are in this whole structure was about 10 or 12 feet tall. And these tunnels that go through, that's where you're loading it up with firewood.
Oh, okay, the fire goes in there.
And you might be able to tell, you can see there was clay on the outside of this. So when they constructed this, just by stacking the bricks, they took a trowel and clay and they absolutely sealed this thing up, make it like an oven, to keep the heat in. And all I can tell you is, if you came here like the day before they were gonna fire the kiln, you would just see this huge square thing with clay on the outside, and you can't see the individual bricks because the clay is covering up. If for some reason you walk by here and you didn't know this was a brickyard, you might not know what this big thing is. It's just a big square. It looks like a big square thing of clay. And it took them 4.5 days of constant firing this year to cook all these bricks.
And then they just take them off one by one and stack them where, over here?
Well, you take them, what they're doing is they're separating them by two things. They have bricks in here for different properties, and those were a slightly different size. So they're putting the like bricks together on pallets, and they'll take them over to the job site.
Because they want to match the bricks that are at the building.
And they're not dramatically different, but they're different. You do want to have the same size that they had on that property.
They always talking about, I've been to the different forts, they're talking about that slaves had the fingerprints in. You won't see fingerprints in these, right?
You'll see
will?
Sorts of stuff.
Oh, you will? Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes we have a bunch of them that have people's names in them.
Oh, yeah, I see that one has...
You see it has a name.
Ken? Kern?
And you see, there's a cat. There's a cat.
There's a cat.
Is that a cat or
a raccoon? Bobcat?
I'm not sure what it is. It looks like a cat.
It's something with 4 legs.
Yeah. So when they're out there on the drying bed, like the ones are right now you could still go up and stick your finger in it, until it gets dry.
Some cat got chased by a dog across.
Some just walk across at nighttime. It happens every night.
From the wilderness, yeah.
While they're out there drying. But this is a successful kiln here this year, and the only thing that I'll tell you is for a couple people in a history museum, they did a lot of work to make these bricks. But this is all the bricks in here. On average, this is about enough for like 1.5 chimneys.
Wow.
Okay, so it's not a lot of brick.
Yeah.
So so the only thing this brickyard is not doing accurately is they're not producing the volume, right? But they are doing it accurately.
Out of all these bricks, how much percent of them are going to be useful? Or
I was helping them unstack today, and I bet we moved 500 bricks, and we might have had 2 bad ones.
No, that's awesome.
That was just what we did today. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, the huge majority of the bricks are good. And when they're not, the broken bricks, we use them to fill in holes. We use them to whatever.
And the point is learning how they did it in the first place.
And replicating it.
And
we have buildings, and Colonial Williamsburg has been in this game a long time, right?
Yeah.
And we figured out some stuff.
Well, coming on, 100 years?
Yeah, almost. Like when you saw us over there pit sawing.
Yeah, I got a video, yeah.
Yeah, that is, those boards that we're hand sawing, we're going to make sure they go in a place in a building that's visible, right? So if we're having a place in a building that no one's ever going to be able to see that piece of wood, it really doesn't make sense
Yeah.
for us. So we'll use the right kind of size and the right, but we're not going to hand saw it. Same is true with their bricks. They use their bricks, the handmade bricks, in the places where you can see.
Yeah, I've seen where there was a guy out there doing the steps, redoing the wooden steps and railings, and underneath there's, you know, treated lumber that you could see that's, you know, from Home Depot or something with bolts and washers and all that. But then on the outside it's all, you know,
Make sure it looks right.
it looks like it was done by hand.
Well, we've gotten a lot better over the years. I've been a part of a lot of reconstructions here. So
This seems like my dad would have loved working here.
it's fun. It has, you know, as long as we have a project to work on, it's fun.
Oh yeah.
We had one winter where we didn't have anything to work on, and we basically, but you know,
Is that COVID or?
well, COVID was awful on everybody.
Yeah. I worked during COVID.
So did I. Yeah. But for us, see, we work outside.
Yeah.
So we just kept on rolling.
Yeah.
But all like the cabinet shop, actually all the people who worked in shops, they were closed.
I think I had about a month off, and then I applied at this place, and I was like, "Well, do you, you off for COVID?" And they're like, "No, we never stopped."
Yeah, we never. I worked 6 days a week during COVID. We had so much work. I was building docks.
I worked 6 days a week when I was working at the post office. I know that.
Well, we never had so much. My family has a dock building business, and everybody was at home more, paying attention to stuff that needed to be fixed, and we worked all the time. It was like we could have worked 7 days a week if we wanted to.
Well, I'm dashing across the United States now, so I can work if I want to work. If I want to go to Colonial Williamsburg, I go to Colonial Williamsburg.
Okay.
You know.
Hey there, we're actually going to be closing up the yard here pretty soon.
PDQ. What time is it? Almost 5?
I think that was the
5
5 bell at the just a
Was
second
it?
ago. Yeah.
Nice talking to you.
All right.
Have a great day.
All right. Thanks.
Have a great day.
All right.